Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. When it comes to Redsec here in Battlefield, obviously you have your ability to get your custom weapons throughout the missions, or if someone else completes them, everyone gets access to that custom weapon drop that falls in there. And so you obviously want to make sure you've got that nice assortment of your own custom weapon builds that you're comfortable with. You know the exact feel and behavior of those guns, rather than potentially leaving it up to chance with some ground loot guns. Maybe you get some weapon upgrades, but it's giving you a strange optic, or it's not the ideal loadout. It's not suppressed in some cases. Obviously, they're not going to always cater to exactly what you're looking for in a weapon. So with your custom weapon builds, you can really have that nice safety net every single game. And so today, I wanted to go through and really break down what to look out for in each attachment category as you are going through and building out your ideal loadouts on an assortment of weapons. We'll talk about what to work on for the close range, or what to look for long range, whatever the case is here, using the M4A1 just as an example, but we'll go category by category with some of these accessories, attachments of different types here. Everything will be timestamped, so if you're just looking to hear more about, you know, the underbarrels versus the barrels versus ergonomics, whatever the case is, you can easily skip to that, or you can just go through one by one as we break everything down here. First and foremost, the most straightforward attachment category here ultimately is going to be the optics, because this is always going to be preference. There are some optics that I think are a little bit more ideal as far as the reticles go and everything, things like the AP12 1.75 times and ROM 1.75 times, some of the 2 times and the 3 times scopes. I think they have very clean reticles. It's easy to stay on target, low visual recoil, but someone really might like a 5 times scope, someone really might like a 1 time scope. Optics largely are going to be preference, even though there are some like more fan favorite style ones here. If it works for you, it works for you, and it's not a guarantee it's going to work for the next person. But when it comes down to optics, whether you're sniping with a ranged scope, whether you're using a close range gun, maybe you like the basic iron sights on some of these guns, or you like a different various level zoom here, it's all preference. So find the one that you are the most accurate with, that you are the most comfortable with, and use that as your main optic on your setups, and of course adjust it for whatever weapons you need. This is easily the category with the most personalization and individualization applied to it here overall. Top accessories. Lasers here are going to be the most dominant for any close range weapon. So if you're building out a rifle or a carbine to play close range, this could be really advantageous. SMGs really is where you're going to see this be the most effective, some shotguns as well. And the main 2 here that I think are the most advantageous are the 2 blue lasers, the 50 milliwatt blue, then also the 120 milliwatt blue. 120 is going to offer you slightly better hip fire than the 50 milliwatt, but each of these is going to be super important, because not only are you getting better hip fire accuracy, which you're typically doing with a close range gun exclusively, like you wouldn't be using this on a sniper or anything, right? But that's huge for the close range. So SMGs, some shotguns, more aggressive rifle builds that you may be doing, this works great. But also the big thing here is the improvement to ADS accuracy while moving. So your accuracy is going to be better, your spread is going to be better as you are strafing, which obviously is going to introduce some bloom or some spread there naturally. This helps counter that some, which is huge, and each of these will actually apply to that. So that is really, really important there, and why I think the blue lasers stand out the most. Obviously they are a little bit more expensive, but for weapons that you're going to be using in those close range scenarios or doing a lot of strafing with, SMGs in specific I think is where it stands out the most. Those are 2 very, very valuable attachments. For the right accessories here, sometimes you get the light on weapons. This can be useful. It's obviously going to throw some enemies off because it is kind of blinding, but it also is going to be very telling of where you are. You're going to have to manually take note of turning this on and off when you don't want to necessarily be spotted at some pretty extreme distances. This in multiplayer, I feel like has a much larger impact on gameplay than in Battle Royale, where this might actually tell on yourself at times. So this isn't necessarily one I'd always recommend, but some players like to have that sort of trolley experience, or you like the effectiveness that it can have in some close range fights, and it can be useful in very niche situations, but that is 10 points you're spending for very, very specific stuff there. So just be mindful of that. It's not a bad attachment, but I don't think it's as important or as valuable as some of the muzzles, the barrels, other things we'll be focusing on here, right? Speaking of muzzles, this is one of the most important categories that we've got, and there's 2 different ways you can approach this. Control or stealth. I think a lot of people here in Battle Royale especially are gonna focus more on stealth, which means leaning towards some of these suppressors here. Ultimately, the best version, unless you are exclusively playing close range, is gonna be the lightened suppressor, because this will hurt your hip fire accuracy, but if you're playing for the mid to long range, that's not super relevant. That's not where your build is gonna thrive to begin with, but it's gonna help out with recoil control, and it's gonna fully hide you in world when you're shooting, which is huge. Obviously, if you're using any of the compensators here, the converter, the brake, anything like that, when you fire, you're gonna show up as a red dot. You're gonna show up on the compass. You will get third-partied because of that. You will have enemies rushing you because of that, which can lead to you getting taken out. Whereas with the suppressors, that's obviously not going to be a factor. But the lightened suppressor here, doing control and stealth at the same time, only hurting hipfire, is going to be more advantageous than like a long suppressor, which actually helps out with control and stealth, but it's going to hurt your hipfire and weapon sway, which is not as ideal, especially on like semi-auto guns, DMRs, things of that nature that could end up impacting you negatively there. So I'd always try and go for the lightened suppressor on any mid to long range based builds. Close range, the CQB suppressor will ultimately be the best. It's also the most expensive for what it's worth, but it doesn't hurt your hipfire and it still hides you. So that's a huge win there. Otherwise, the standard suppressor here, just hurting your hipfire accuracy, not going to hurt your sway or anything, is always a solid choice, and it's a little bit cheaper. So between the standard suppressor, the lightened suppressor, the CQB, those are the three main standouts. If you're still leveling your guns and all you have is a long suppressor, that'll work, but there are better options out there, in my opinion. Now, if you're okay with not being stealthy, you don't need to stay hidden like that, and you want to use a compensator for control, the linear comp is going to be fantastic at making weapons feel more straightforward. Also, the compensated break, though, helping with the recoil buildup and improving that recoil recovery, especially because tap firing is really rewarded in Redsec here. This could be a huge helper as well. Those are the main two that I'd probably look for there, the compensator and the compensated break. Again, though, you will show up on the radar, so you have to be mindful of that at all times. I've already tested out some builds using this, and I absolutely noticed, okay, I'm the only one in my squad using an unsuppressed weapon, and these guys are definitely pushing us because they saw my red dot show up. This can be really telling late game when that circle is small, the fire is closing in. The enemies are going to know your exact position if you start firing. You know, if there's 3 or 4 teams left and you're shooting at one, the other 2 teams will know, okay, we have a squad over there, and that can really disadvantage you at times. So I would personally prioritize stealth, but I understand that's also not everyone's preferred style of play, but you've got great options here for all those styles, really. And by the way, as we are going through all the attachments, all the setups you want to be looking at here today, if you guys enjoy the video, you find the information helpful, a like rating is always seriously appreciated. It really does help grow the channel. And if you're new here, you want to ensure you are always up to date with everything going on in Battlefield, this is the place to be. So feel free to hit that subscribe button and turn on those post notifications. Next up here in the barrels, especially for how Redsec plays with so many engagements taking place at a distance, even if you're using a more close range gun at times, there's 2 barrels that stand out the most to me, and not every gun is always going to have these 2, which is kind of interesting. So you're going to have to be mindful as you're going through. But the extended barrels, first and foremost, increasing projectile velocity and also giving you a faster ADS. That's solid there. The ADS bonus is really cool, but the velocity is what we care about the most. You don't have to worry as much about bullet drop and bullet lead. And in Redsec, when so many fights are across a valley or from hillside to hillside, you're on a hill looking down into, you know, a building complex or whatever the case is, or vice versa, you have a lot of really ranged fights, and the better velocity is going to be huge at making the gunfights feel more consistent here. If you have a low velocity, your hit reg is going to feel a little bit weird because it's going to take longer for those bullets to hit. You got to compensate more for bullet drop and bullet lead. So that's a really important one. Other weapons do also offer the heavy extended barrel, which give you better recoil control over sustained fire, which is huge, or better accuracy over sustained fire, which is huge, and the better velocity. Other weapons also just have the heavy barrel, and sometimes they don't have the extended, in which case that's just the better accuracy over sustained fire. So any one of those 3, or ultimately the heavy extendeds, the best of both worlds, are really the ones you want to look out for the most. I even use those on my SMGs because you can find yourself in some interesting mid-range fights with subs where that better velocity will come into play. Other than that, you know, if you're building a gun to be really aggressive, like an SMG, a light barrel or a short barrel for things could be decent that help out with hip fire, like if you're going exclusively for that niche, but that's very direct and obviously not necessarily the more overall global reliable build that's built for one specific purpose. So those have a purpose at times, but ultimately extended, heavy, extended, or heavy are the main standouts there. Now on your underbarrels, you've got a ton of choices. It can kind of almost be overwhelming at times as to what you want to focus on here, but luckily a lot of these are really good. Really what you want to be mindful of is the cost on some of these. Like for instance, the ribbed stubby is very good. It also costs 30 points for slightly reducing recoil and giving you a better ADS speed. Like this is something that could be really valuable on an SMG if you've got the points, and if you don't need to spend some points elsewhere on an extended mag or on some ergonomics or whatever the case is, right? So if you have points to use and you really want to optimize your control and potentially get some nice bonuses like ADS, there are some great choices here. A lot of the time though, those are going to be maybe a little bit too expensive if you're trying to have a well-rounded build. So you're going to be looking at things like the angled underbarrel, helping out with slightly improving recoil, improves weapon draw speed, a faster ADS as well, but it'll hurt ADS accuracy while moving. So like, you got to be mindful of those. A couple of those will actually have that con. Others will end up impacting accuracy when you're just aiming down sights. That's not as brutal of a con as the strafing penalty is, because obviously strafing is going to add in some cons as is. So that kind of heightens it and really exemplifies it more extreme there. But ultimately, to me, something like the 6H64 or the classic is going to be the best when you just are looking for straight up recoil control. You want your weapon to be much easier to use. Those are going to be the two that I think have a pretty noticeable impact, especially if you're stacking a compensator or a linear comp on there. You also have things that are going to be maybe a little bit cheaper, like the basic vertical, the folding one there, or the alloy here, which doesn't actually have cons, but it's only slightly going to reduce recoil. So if your weapon is not too jumpy, the bounce isn't too extreme, but you want something that'll still help make it a little bit easier without the worry of cons, an alloy could be very advantageous there too. A lot of the angled though are going to be solid here. Like, a lot of them ultimately will do very similar things. Pay attention to some of those values in the bottom right. They're not 100% accurate, but it's a nice sort of beginning point of like, okay, this is going to do a little bit more for my precision or my spread. This will be doing a little bit more for my control, and it's going to be weapon dependent. Some you're not going to need as much recoil control. Others you might want to focus on some ADS speed. Like if you got an LMG, this can help you know, the slim angled here be really advantageous there and making it feel more aggressive. This is one I rock a lot as well. So you have a lot of options here. It's really going to come down to the specific weapon, how bad the recoil may be, what the ADS is like and everything, and if you're really worried about strafe spread or general spread potentially impacting your fights. With the magazines, it's pretty straightforward, especially if you're playing quads right now. It's not as necessary in duos, but it's always a nice safety net is when you can get extended mags here. If you've got a weapon leveled up and it's got a slightly larger extended mag, 36, 40, 45, 60, or 50 in some cases too, typically always going to try and force an extended mag into my gameplay. I will say this is maybe one of the things you could focus on last, because especially with how fast the TTK is, you can get by using some of the standard mags. Some weapons only have like 20 or 25 bullets, and you might be pushing it there, but like a 30 rounder, depending on the gun, you can get by with because the TTK is so fast. And especially if you're playing with your duo or with your squad, you have that safety net of them helping out as well and firing. But the nice safety net is always going to have that extended mag. So I'd go through and typically sort out everything. Okay, I've got my optic, I've got my muzzle, my barrel, my underbarrel, anything else I might need to add, and I still got some points. Okay, now I can go to you know, the second tier extended mag or something like that. But that's really what you want to focus on the most. If you can't afford a full extended mag, it's a little bit too expensive, then just trying to get a fast mag so you can reload a little bit faster is always going to be useful too. It's really about trying to utilize those safety nets where you can. They're not a must-have mandatory thing because the TTK is at where it's at right now, but it's never a bad thing. It's not going to hurt you by any means. With the ammo here, I've actually found myself using lightweight a lot in these situations, primarily because so many weapons in this game have a 25 damage value, which means when you're using hollow point, it's not actually going to lower the amount of shots you need to hit to you know, take out an enemy to get a faster TTK. Synthetic sometimes can be useful there, but again, it's going to be a very case by case scenario. One weapon, it can have a huge impact. The next one, it's basically obsolete. With hollow point or synthetic, they're not always having a huge advantage. Now, on weapons that have 33 damage, then hollow point can end up lowering the shot to kill by 1. Synthetic can be really powerful in some cases. Also pretty expensive, whereas lightweight, only 10 points and giving you a faster ADS on really any weapon. This can be beneficial. Close range, a faster ADS, that's a win. Long range, say you got a heavy LMG, anytime you can speed it up to be a little bit more versatile, that's a win as well. So I've actually found myself sort of defaulting to this quite a bit in a lot of scenarios there, but also be mindful of hollow point and synthetic where possible, because they could potentially help out, especially if you're really good at aiming for the upper body, particularly the head. But be mindful of those damage values, because sometimes it's just there for show and not actually having an impact on your weapon. And then lastly, for some of the standard attachment categories here, you've got like the ergonomics. In some cases, you'll only have 1 or 2 of these. In others, you have quite a few options. Something like a mag flare, enabling reloading while aiming down sights. Not always the most important. Like, you can absolutely un-ADS and still see things very easy. For 10 points, I feel like that's maybe better spent elsewhere. The mag catch can be really useful though for that faster reload speed. That's just a win. That's an objective win, getting that faster reload where you can, especially if you can stack this with like a fast mag or something. You've got only 5 points left over. Little freebie here, you can get a faster reload, never a bad thing. The trigger is for very specific playstyles, enhancing semi-auto performance. Some weapons will probably really benefit from this, but again, it's a case-by-case thing. For weapons, it might be useless. One, it might be phenomenal. It also is going to increase the skill gap of the weapon, of course, and I think for most players, just using a DMR like the SVK or the ESR or whatever, right? Like those will just be more advantageous at that point, but it is something you could mess around with. I don't think it's something that's going to be a main standout for the vast majority of guns though. And then also the rail cover available this season improves weapon draw speed. Also not a bad thing by any means. It's an objective helper there in terms of your stats. But again, 5 points left over. That could be something you just stack on, not necessarily something you have to force into your gameplay. Now, obviously, some weapons will ultimately end up having some different attachment categories, you know, for their specific niche. Like, for instance, on snipers, you've got the option to have a rangefinder here as well, which is super, super useful. Being able to auto zero in, then you don't have to compensate a ton for bullet drop or bullet lead. That's a huge, huge helping hand, in which case it'd be very valuable on a setup like this. These guns also, like snipers, for instance, have ADS bolts where they're very expensive, but you can rechamber while aiming down sights and you can keep that visibility. Not something I find I have to force into my gameplay, but also something that some players might get a lot of value out of if they don't like the un-ADS and having to re-find their target again every time they fire a bullet. So it's going to be more of a preference thing and a very expensive preference thing, but also something that can be very good if you can make the cost work on a setup like this, where like I have to have a decent suppressor and that's pretty expensive. I like to have a faster ADS and whatnot, like getting the better velocity and everything in case I don't, you know, range find correctly, or I have to quickly go back and forth between targets and they're at different distances. This can make life easier. So there's a few things, a few asterisks on a few weapons that'll change things up in very niche ways. But yeah, overall, those are the main standouts here when it comes to building your Redsec loadout. Some things you want to look out for. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the most important categories here are going to be your muzzles, your barrels, your underbarrels, your optics, in my opinion, and then everything else is sort of playing into your play style. Do you need that extended mag? Do you need that laser for hip fire or strafe accuracy? Do you need the faster reload or to get the lightweight ammo? Barrels, underbarrels, muzzles, optics, the main four you want to really devote a lot of your points to, and then beyond that you can really customize to your liking there. But I really do like the layout here and the general breakdown of how you go through and you build your custom guns, because there is so much personality involved in every one of these builds, which I think is really fun. But that is going to wrap things up. If you guys enjoyed this video, you found it helpful, do me a favor, drop a like on it, and of course, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button on your way out so you can always guarantee you are in the know for everything going on in Battlefield. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.